Thank you. That's a lot of pressure. So I have no disclosure. So on behalf of my team, I would like to thank the ICS for the opportunity to present our data. So we all know that the objective evaluation of the pelvic floor muscles, more specifically the assessment of pelvic floor tone or stiffness, poses an ongoing challenge. Shear wave elastography was shown to be a promising, non-invasive technique for assessing stiffness of limb and trunk muscles. However, there is no study thus far that have investigated the validity of shear wave to assess the puborectalis muscle. And a comprehensive validation of shear wave is needed given that this muscle is complex and given that anisotropy may influence the measurement. For example, measure can be influenced by the orientation of the ultrasound beam relative to the muscle fibers. So the aim of the study was to examine the relationship between changes in muscle stiffness evaluated with the shear wave and pelvic floor muscle activation evaluated with EMG during contractions of the puborectalis muscle at different target intensities. So 15 asymptomatic women participated in the study. Pelvic floor muscle activation was assessed with a small intravaginal EMG suction electrode positioned on the puborectalis muscle. 6-second pelvic floor muscle contraction were performed at different intensity, 10, 20, 30, 50, and 75, and 100% of maximal voluntary contraction in a random order while having visual feedback. And simultaneously, shear wave elastography was measured with a linear transducer positioned lateral to the vaginal opening and aligned so that the muscle fascicle could be visualized. So 2 repetitions were averaged, and obviously the right and the left side were measured separately. So we obtained that normalized shear wave and root mean square EMG were highly correlated. So we obtained average coefficient of determination across individual participant of 0.9 and 0.87, which is a correlation of over 94, so very high. And when we included those values in a regression analysis, the the coefficient of determination was 0.8 and 0.72 for the left and the right side. So in conclusion, these findings provide evidence to support the validity of shear wave elastography to quantify puborectalis stiffness. Shear wave measures were found to be strongly associated with the intensity of pelvic floor contraction, and this forms the basis to further investigate the clinical relevance of shear wave for evaluating overactivity and pelvic floor muscle pain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is now open for questions from the floor. No questions? I have a question for you. Could you please tell us how you managed to control the intensity of those pelvic floor muscle contractions?
So that's a very good question. So the patient, we recorded the EMG activity with the suction electrode, and then they were able to see the target on the screen so that they could reach 10, 20, and 30, and 75%, whatever. And also afterwards, we did some correlation to see if they actually succeed in doing those tasks. And the coefficient of determination were 0.99 and 0.98. So they were very good pelvic floor. They controlled well their pelvic floor.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Helena Frawley, Melbourne. Thanks, Melanie. Lovely study. With the high correlation you saw with EMG,
Yep.
Given the EMG is registering the active component of tone, whereas the shear wave elastography will be measuring both, does that tell you anything about the relative contributions of the active and passive to tone if it's correlated so highly with the active?
I think it's because we assess the changes that occur. So the changes is probably, is related to the active component. So I think that's why we obtain, and we kind of isolate the passive component because we are assessing the changes at different intensity.
So it was a linear
Yeah,
relationship.
does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
But we're talking about stiffness. Could you examine muscle tone?
Yeah. Well, the purpose of that was really to assess the stiffness with the shear wave elastography. So it gives a measure of average shear wave elastic modulus. So that's the way that the shear wave work. So we did not add any dynamometry measure to that study, but we also add some ultrasound measure with B mode. So, and we obtained good correlation too, but this was not presented today. Obviously, so we didn't assess other measure of resting tone. Thank you.